Welcome to Become the Leader, the show that equips you to rise higher, lead stronger, and become the leader you would follow. Hey guys, Jody Holland here with Become the Leader podcast. We have a good one for you today. We're going to be talking about how you burn your boats and go all in on your goals. But before we do that, just to make sure you remember who we are. So I'm Jody.
Malia Grigsby.
I'm Megan Slaughter.
Mike.
So 2026 has already been kind of interesting. And we were thinking about, we kind of came into this year thinking, oh, this is going to be so much better than 2025. And 2025 was a bit crazy and got into 2026. And I've already heard a number of people say, I would like my money back. This has not turned out exactly the way that I wanted it to turn out. And we are just a couple of weeks into the year as we're recording this. But I want to talk about a story about a guy named Hernando Cortez. It was way back in 1519. And in 1519, he had raised a bunch of money, put everything in from himself that he could. And he was like, okay, I want to go take the world's greatest treasure. I'm pretty sure today we call those people thieves, but back then he was a conqueror, and conquerors were very prestigious. So he raised some money, got the king and queen of Spain to put in some money, recruited 500 soldiers, 100 sailors, bought 16 horses and 11 ships, and he had one singular goal: take the world's greatest treasure. Problem was, for over 600 years, people have been trying to take this treasure. So he analyzed what was going on. And I want you to think about how you would apply this in business. But he analyzed and he said, well, everybody else that tried to take the treasure, it was a stop on a bigger journey. And he said, this is my only goal. One goal, one drive, one thing I'm going to do: take the world's greatest treasure. And the Aztecs have been able to defend this treasure for, like I said, 6 centuries. Nobody had ever been able to take it. So he goes there, and instead of like just going straight over there and going, we will take the treasure, like he made the journey. And just like most journeys, people started whining along the way. They're like, my batteries are dead on my Nintendo, and or whatever it was they complained about in 1519. I'm not
Yeah,
really sure, but they
that's
finally
probably what
make,
it was.
yeah, I think it was the Nintendo. They finally get there and they get off the boats, and instead of going straight into battle, he has them get their land legs back. So they don't just jump off the ships and run into battle. For 2 weeks on the shores, they practice. They practice fighting. They practice doing their victory dance and whatever it is that they're going to do when they hit the end zone. And ultimately, they visualize. And this is the part that I think we forget to do in business: is whatever we visualize becomes our dominant thought. Therefore, that becomes the thing that we manifest in our world. Well, they visualized what it was going to feel like when all of their family and their friends saw them coming home with the world's greatest treasure, and they were being celebrated. They were being patted on the back and lifted in the town square, and all the things that would make them physically feel great for doing the thing that they went there to do. And they get about 2 weeks into this, and Hernando Cortez gathers his men around him that evening around a fire, and they're all thinking, okay, we're going to visualize again. But he says, we're going to do something that will really change the course of history here. And they're like, here goes the speech. And he had already dispatched men to the 11 boats that were anchored just out in that little harbor area, and they set them on fire. They burned the boats. And as he looked at his men, he said, this is not a if the arrows fly, I'll meet you back at the coconut stump kind of speech right now. This is, if we're going home on their boats. And I remember hearing this story when I was first in business, and I thought, man, what's it like to give up all of your option B, C, D, E, and F and have only one option for success? So when people started asking me after I heard this story, hey, what's your option B if this business thing doesn't work out? My response was probably a little harsh, but my response was death. And they go, wait, what? I go, yeah, I'm either going to win or I'm going to die trying. There is no other option. Because what happened in those men, when they realized that the boats were gone and their only option was victory or death, is they became the world's greatest fighters, and they took the world's greatest treasure. So I just wanted to kind of tell the story as we got started here. And I want you to think about, how do you set the kind of goals where you don't give yourself an option other than hitting your target? And what does that do to your psyche when there's no other option but that? So I'm going to kind of open it up for just banter back and forth and discussion. What do you guys think from a goal setting standpoint when you don't have an option B? How does that impact you?
I really think that it has to become a part of your identity. It has to be who you are at your core from the start of your day until the end of your day. You wake up thinking about your goals, you go to bed thinking about your goals, and it becomes so ingrained in you that you can't imagine life any other way. And you start chasing that goal with every fiber of your being.
So I think about your speech, Mike, at your MBA graduation. I'm really
Mhm.
glad I was there for that, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
But talk a little bit about what you talked about in the speech about some of the goals that you had. This is back like in year 2000 that you had
Oh
written
yeah.
down.
Yeah, so that was in 2017 that I graduated and got my MBA. But you and I had gone through a program, and we had visualized certain different things, kind of set some goals. And I had written them down in a notebook. And literally about a week before my graduation, um, I found that notebook. I didn't even remember that I had it. I found that notebook and went through. I don't know. Maybe I had written down 20, 25 different things. They were goals. I mean, like one of the goals was I was going to take a ride in an F-16 airplane. One was I was going to own what's it
Bentley,
called?
wasn't it?
A Bentley. Yeah, a
Yeah.
Bentley. So those are still on the list. Anybody listening, if you have a ticket to an F-16 ride, I'm all in.
Or have a
But
Bentley you'd like to
or
give
have a
away.
Bentley. Yeah, I'll take that too. But what was interesting was of those 20 some odd goals, I had already accomplished probably 75% of them. One of them was learn Spanish, one of them was get an MBA, one of them was, get certain positions or titles and things like that. And I didn't remember, as I was getting through that, I didn't remember going daily and looking at that and going, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. I think it kind of goes to Megan's point. It kind of became part of my psyche, part of my identity, and it was a thing that kind of became radioactive as those opportunities showed up. It became radioactive. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going for that, having forgotten that I had already said I wanted that, almost 20 years prior to it. So definitely write your goals down. I think that's one of the first things. Write your goals down and be very specific. It wasn't, I wanted to take a plane ride. It was, I want to be in an F-16. It wasn't, I want to get a college degree. It was, I want an MBA. It wasn't just, hey, I'd love to learn a foreign language. It was, I want to learn Spanish. So be very specific about your goals. And I do think it's important. Who knows? It might have taken me only 10 years or 5 years if I had looked at it more frequently. But I think you definitely need to pay attention to your goals. Look at them periodically and remind yourself, hey, is this still true north? Is this still the place where I want to go and where I want to land? Because, over the course of time, life and circumstances change. Is that still the thing that you want to go? I would imagine, and I'll take a breath with this, but I would imagine that there were a few storms on the seas where Cortez and his men were going. I think he had to check himself a couple times, like, "Hey, is this still where we want to go? Is this still what we're wanting to do?" Circumstances will always be there. There'll never be a place called smooth sailing. There'll never be a place called done. So make sure that you're checking yourself periodically and make sure that those are still the same goals you want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there was a really important piece of that story that I really want to highlight, and it's the fact that even before they fully committed to the other side or committing, or what am I trying to
To
say?
that objective,
Taking
yeah.
over the great treasure, they took a moment to visualize not just what they were wanting to do, but how they wanted to feel after doing it. And I think that's something I've grown up in a very feelings forward mother. And so that's something that we have always focused on is not necessarily what is the thing that you want to do, but how do you want to feel afterwards? And once you understand that, because as sentient beings, even if we're on the more non-emotional side, we still are feelings forward. And so once you understand what feeling you want, how you want to portray yourself to the people around you, I think it will determine not just the goals themselves, but how you approach those goals. And once you understand that for this example of the story, when you say, I want to go home holding the treasure high with my wife running up to me, open arms, saying, oh my gosh, you're the most amazing man in the entire world. I'm so glad I'm married to you. Once you understand that
Happens a
that's
lot.
once you understand that that's your goal, you're willing to set everything aside for it. If
Yeah.
your goal is to just, it'd be nice to have a cup of coffee with this person because I think that it would make me feel more important or whatever, you're gonna half-ass it every single time.
Yeah.
So you have to set your goals high, reasonable, but high, understanding that the level and the exact goal will determine how much you're willing to put in and how much you're willing to leave behind to achieve that goal.
And I think that's a key point. I kind of tie all this together a little bit that what are you willing to leave behind or give up becomes really important. And that was the point of Burn the Boats. They were trying to make sure that they were willing to leave behind everything in order to accomplish this goal. And I know Mike and I are both fans of Neville Goddard. I'm not sure, Leah and Megan, if y'all have read Goddard or not, but he talks a lot about that. And that's one of the concepts he says is I want you to imagine what it feels like when somebody shakes your hand and tells you congratulations after you hit your goal.
Yeah.
Another guy that I studied was out of Moscow, Idaho, and he was the first money back guarantee religion. And it was kind of interesting. A religion that he started was called Psychiana. I don't know if you ever looked at that or not, Mike, but I
No.
was in a bookstore in Moscow, Idaho. I was doing work in Lewiston, so that's about 30 minutes away from there. And I came across this history book about him, and he's been gone for quite some time. But it was like $5 a month, mail order religion. And he would send you a new pamphlet every month. And if you didn't make more money and find greater joy in your life, you got your money back. He was investigated by the federal government for fraud, and 50,000 plus people sent testimonials in support of him, and nobody said that it didn't work. But here's the secret to it. So I bought all of his stuff. I got to see what this is. I read all of Psychiana. This was 10 years ago or so. But one of the things that he talked about in there is what you were saying, Malia, is you've got to generate the feeling. And then he was also saying what you said, Megan, and make it your identity. And so it's kind of interesting when you tie those two things together. Who am I and what feeling am I seeking? Because you can feel rich without a lot of money. So you're trying to get in a goal standpoint of what is it that I want to feel? Because there are people that are retired that live on $30,000 a year and they feel very lucky and very wealthy. And there are
Mhm.
people that are retired and live on 200,000 a year and feel broke. So it's not the actual outcome that most people are looking for. It's the feeling and the identity associated with the outcome. And I think the same thing is true in goals. Like I'm not trying to be Tony Robbins. Like I have a lot of respect for Tony Robbins, but I'm not trying to be Tony Robbins. I'm trying to be the best version of Jody Holland that I can be, and that's the thing that makes me happy. And so for each of us, you're trying to figure out from a goal standpoint, what are you willing to leave behind? Who are you at your very best? And what does it take to actually get there? And I would argue a very good lifestyle business because I get to take vacation once a quarter. I get to make pretty decent money doing what I'm doing, and I get to help people. And a lot of my identity is tied in helping people. So when I burn the boats, it's, well, I don't want to go take a job with somebody else because I wouldn't have the opportunity to do the things that fit my identity. So I want to kind of circle back to Megan. We've all been talking pretty good, me especially, but tell me a little bit more on the identity thing. Like, how does that play out in your life as to who you are and how you enjoy not just the goal itself, but the pursuit of the goal?
I think for me personally, education has been very tied to my identity in the past. And when I graduated college, I really had to figure out what my identity was going to be moving forward. So I still have that learning piece in all of my goals. And every year I take some time to reflect on the past year and see if I met my goals and what goals I'm going to be setting for myself in the future. And so I set these goals that are attainable, but I also set goals that I feel like are going to stretch me as a person and that are going to help me grow. And so I do something every year that's a little bit scary, but I know that the only way to overcome the fear of that thing is to face it head on. So I purposely do something every year that I wouldn't normally be comfortable doing. And then once I have achieved that goal, I'm the kind of person who does that scary thing. And it becomes easier and easier as you progress and you keep setting your new goals. So, kind of like what Mike was saying, there's never a place called done. You're always going to be setting new milestones for yourself. And when you have something in your sights, that is your sole focus. You're not necessarily looking at what comes next. You reach that point and then you say, okay, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be moving forward. And as this new person who does this thing, what am I going to be pursuing in the future? And so you just keep pushing forward, you keep growing, and as you grow, your potential grows. And so your identity is constantly transforming. I'm not the same person that I was when I was 15. My goals are completely different, my identity is different, and I'm chasing different feelings too in everything that I do. You know, when education was a part of my identity in high school, it was I want to make the best grades. Now, with education being a part of my identity, is I want to learn something new every day so that I can deliver value to other people. So, the core of my goals may stay the same, but my goals are transforming as I grow in my own identity.
I think that's important too. And the transformation or the adaptation is what a lot of people miss is we think, well, this is who I said I was going to be. And then you get it. And it's a lot of times disappointing. And I remember hearing the valedictorian from King's Cross give a speech, and it was King's Cross was a private school. So this is a high school graduation speech. And he said junior year, he figured out it was between him and another person. And he thought, I want that. That is my precious, or whatever ring he was chasing there. So he gave up time with friends and he gave up, all of his extracurriculars and he just buckled down and focused on the study. And he got there and they called him in and said, you're valedictorian. And he said, it felt so good for about 5 minutes. And then he thought, I just gave up my entire high school experience so I could say that I was smarter than one other person because you're not comparing yourself to all of the other people. You're comparing
Right.
yourself to the
Right.
salutatorian because that's who you were competing with. So I think part of what we miss on our goals is sometimes our goals have to be the pursuit of the experience, not just the pursuit of the outcome. And
Oh yeah.
each year I want to spend a certain number of days helping people become a better leader as opposed to I want to make X amount of money. And when I shifted my goals towards serving others and the experience of serving others, I became a much happier person. And I do get frustrated when we lose our opportunities to serve others, but that's just like a Burt boning, a boat
Yes. It's one of
burning.
those. It's one of those.
Words are hard, man. Words are hard.
Englishing is hard.
Yeah, Englishing is hard. So when we burn those boats and we get knocked on our rear, all we got to do is get back up and go, I just got to go one more time. And I think that's a great lesson, whether you've ever been a martial artist or ever done anything else, along the route of fighting. The key is just to get up one more time, then you get knocked down. And I think that's what Cortez was trying to tell in the story that he lived out is we're going to keep fighting. We're not going to give up. We're not going to say, wow, that was difficult. We should not do that anymore. Let's take a break. It was when I have a goal and I'm going for it, I'm going to burn any other option so that if I get knocked down, I have the energy to get back up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also think that that's interesting because sometimes our boats will burn without us meaning for them to.
Mm.
We didn't intentionally set them on fire, but sometimes you find yourself in this position where the only way out is to go forward. and find another way. And you kind of have to adapt to that as you go. And you have to evaluate yourself and figure out what you're willing to sacrifice moving forward when sacrifices have been made that you didn't necessarily want to be made.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points of the Cortez story. You know, I've visited Mexico City. I've seen, you know, the conquest, you know, the spoils of the conquest and things along those lines. And you know, I would imagine every one of his men that was on that, you know, journey with him imagined themselves being victorious. Well, not everybody made it back, right? There were a lot of people that fell along the way, either got sick just getting over there. I mean, go back to what that era was, right? They got sick and died going over there. And then you have the battles, you have the fights, and then you lose more men and so forth. And I think the reality is that we are maybe I'll even say kind of Western society, right? Is we're so hard on ourselves if we miss a goal. You know, Megan, you were talking about getting good grades in schools. Like an A minus is a really, really good grade, but because it wasn't an A plus, we hold ourselves to this, you know, this really, really high standard, right? We miss kind of the forest for the trees, and we forget that setback is actually part of the journey. There's no place called smooth sailing, right? There's no journey that is just completely uneventful. So we have to give ourselves allowance for that. But the other part of it too is that I think, and I think Jody, you said this just a second ago, right? It is about making the achievement, but it's also about evolving and learning why you're making those achievements, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to be in grade school or high school and go, I need to be the valedictorian. Okay, once you get that experience, what did that mean for you? You got it. What did that mean for you?
Now
And you
what?
begin to evolve and go, oh, it really wasn't about the grade itself. It was about the pursuit of this. It was about the experience. Okay, so now you've evolved and you've added that kind of facet to your life. Now you begin to pursue other goals with that context in mind. You still have the achievement, but now you have a richer dimension to yourself as you're going after that. I think the last thing I'll say is that it's interesting too because the feeling of that valedictorian success for 5 minutes is fleeting for almost everything, whether you win the Super Bowl, whether you win the lottery,
Mhm.
whether you win, it's fleeting, right? If I ever bought that Bentley, the first time Jody gets in the car, he's like, man, this is an awesome car. The second time he gets in that car, he's be like, hey, where we're going, right? It doesn't say anything about the car, right?
Yeah.
I heard this a while back, and it says the first thing you see when you reach the peak of the mountain you're climbing is the peak of another mountain. And it's just this continuous journey of, hey, where are we going and what experiences are we collecting along the way?
Yeah. And what I think we should fall in love with is that journey. Like
Yeah.
climbing the mountain is the thing that's supposed to be fun. And then you see the next mountain, you're like, there it is. I get to climb another one. But if the goal was to just get to that mountain peak, when you see the next one that's 50 feet taller, you're like, are you serious right now? Come on. So I think when we set goals, the part that changes the identity, that creates the feeling that keeps us moving forward is fall in love with the challenge. Don't fall in
Yeah.
love with the outcome. And I think
Yeah.
Cortez, I don't honestly think he cared about the treasure. Like I really look him, I don't know the guy. I mean, he's been dead a while, but I think what he
For a
cared
minute.
about was knowing, can you take the world's greatest treasure? Because nobody else could.
Uh,
That was what he cared about. And I'm sure when he did that, he thought, what's next? And that's
but I
the
think it's
thing that
also,
we have to fall in
yeah, I
love
think it's
with.
also about paying attention to who you're becoming on the journey, right?
Mhm.
Because if you get to that peak, if you get that ring, if you get that Super Bowl or Bentley or whatever, are do you still like the guy that you are or the gal that you are? Right? Who are you? Pay attention to who you're becoming as you're going along the lines because you got to live with yourself the entire time, right? So that has to be as much of a goal as the actual achievement itself.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So this has been a great conversation. Thank you guys for this. Just quick reminder, if you are not currently subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do so. We would love to see you on future episodes. If you have any ideas for us on what we could talk about that would make your life a little bit better, please let us know. Each episode drops Wednesday morning at 7:15 a.m. So make sure you're subscribed. It's the perfect morning drive to listen to. I'm Jody Holland,
Leah.
I'm Megan.
Mike.
and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining Become the Leader. Keep growing forward and become the leader you would follow.